It's a very good evening. Welcome to yet another episode of Fourth Estate here on ZTNPRIME channel 294. And on this show, as usual, we tackle all things media and journalism in Zimbabwe and, of course, beyond. I am Tinomda Chakanyuka. I'm your host, and we continue with our discussion from the previous episode. We were looking at the impact of citizen journalism. We also looked at the impact of online journalism, and just before we rounded up the show, we were about to get into the flesh of the discussion, which is our topic today. Now, citizen journalism has come of age, and in the age of digitization, it can be a thorn in the flesh. We all agree. We've seen people crying foul over stories that would have been reported by citizen journalists, mostly online. Now, how does the Zimbabwe Media Commission perceive citizen journalism, especially now that we are heading towards elections?
This citizen journalism is it's a two-edged word, really. It's all very well to just sit and just trash it as bad and unethical, but we have to acknowledge that it does fill in the gaps sometimes that are left by mainstream media. It really does, right? So there are some citizen journalists who, for want of a better word, are doing a good job, if it's a job. So we have no qualms with those ones, because some of them really do inform people. They are there sometimes when the formal news houses take a longer time to get there, or at least they just inform. For example, remember the COVID pandemic. A lot of citizen journalists helped fill in the gaps of knowledge. Unfortunately, then we get to the bad side of it. They were the most serious conspiracy theorists.
Conveyors of misinformation.
Yeah, which I think is where you want us to go to. Unfortunately, there is really nothing you can do with the social media if you do not know the source of that news, that fake news. There's really nothing anybody can do. Because some people really know how to disguise themselves online. For those, perhaps if it's a news house that goes on social media and propagates fake news, it's very easy for us to come down on them because we can trace them. But of course, I know, look, I'm not a tech fundi. I know you can always unmask people, but it's very expensive to do that. And then you're going into issues of the internet service providers who may not want to reveal
the information
exactly on who is who and so on.
But we also have media houses, registered media houses that operate online,
yes,
and some of them are based outside the country, and they've been found wanting regarding the integrity test, if I may put it that way. As a commission, how have you handled these cases?
Yes, like I was saying, if we know them, if they are known, and if they can be traced, we contact them, and we put it to them that perhaps whatever they've done, they've spread misinformation, they've really just violated media ethics, and we talk to them to pull down their posts, or to apologize, or to just maybe issue some sort of redress to whoever they have harmed. That's the best we can do if we can trace them. If we can't trace them, unfortunately, we've got to face it. There's really nothing we can do, because some people are just anonymous on the internet, and what can anyone really do if they don't know the source of the information, if it's just there?
In our previous episode, you mentioned that one of your roles is to handle complaints from people who may feel that their rights might have been infringed. Maybe if you can take us through the process. Someone has had their rights infringed by media houses, be it online or in the mainstream media. How do they go about lodging a complaint? And once a complaint has been lodged, what are the processes or the stages that then follow until recourse is achieved?
Yes, we encourage them to complain, of course, but for now, we are legally bound in terms of our act. Our act, as it is a bit missing in terms of enforcement. So what we do is we obviously handle the complaint and we adjudicate the matter. But we are sort of, stopped when it comes to enforcement. We encourage them to go to the High Court and register if it's whatever, and then they get some, their order, and then it can be registered and enforced, because only the High Court has that mechanism that for enforcement. For now, there's really nothing the Commission can do now except plead, not really plead, plead is the wrong word, but just engage them, yes, engage them, yes. But luckily, the Zimbabwe Media Commission Act, amendment to it is underway. The principles have been approved by Cabinet. So if it goes through Parliament, through the normal lawmaking process, we're going to see a tighter act that actually gives us more powers to deal with around people or media players.
So you actually envisage a situation where the Commission has more teeth?
We want to have more teeth, otherwise we're just a toothless bulldog and we're just wasting everybody's time if we have no teeth. And we don't want to be wasting people's time or our time.
But some feel that engagement is more progressive than the teeth that you're asking for.
Engagement is definitely, but then it's definitely preferable, but not everyone is as reasonable as you'd want. So sometimes you really do need those teeth that bite. But I hadn't finished answering the last question. In terms of just media infringements, that comes under the Zimbabwe Media Commission Act, the one that I've just talked about. But we have more teeth with the Freedom of Information Act, because that act really empowers us. It's got regulations, it's got proper structure on how to deal with access to information infringements. Is very, very clear, and we've got a lot of power in terms of that particular right, access to information. So if your access to information rights are infringed, we welcome you to the Commission, and we have the power to order whoever is breaching your rights to redress them. And we have the power, if they refuse, we have the power to even take it further and enforce it.
What are some of the limitations of the Commission in terms of complaints that you can handle and those that you cannot?
Yeah, the legislation, as I've talked about, the Zimbabwe Media Commission Act itself is very short on what we can actually do to seek redress or to perhaps enforce our orders.
But does it relate to the nature of the case, or it falls short overall?
No, every infringement in the media space, we handle it. Every infringement, whatever complaint. I can't think of anything that we would not be able to handle, because we are the Commission. We have wide powers over the entire media space in Zimbabwe. So I can't think of any limitations of where we'd say, oh, this one we can't handle. It's, I don't know, unless maybe it doesn't fall under our purview.
Like defamation cases, obviously those
yes.
then become either libel or slander, and have to be handled.
Defamation has to be, you can just take
by the courts. But you, in our previous episode, you described a social media as a grey area. As a Commission, how do you propose that more light is cast on that grey area?
We propose, because right now the Cybersecurity Act is not within the grasp of the Commission. We just handle, 3 acts, but not that one. So we propose that there be a social media act that is specifically given to the Commission to administer, because now we don't have any act. We do have control over social media, obviously, especially if it's media houses operating on social media. But when it comes to the generality of social media, I'm sure even you would agree that it's just too wide. The berth is just too wide for any one entity to handle, because it's the worldwide web, and you can't really, our tentacles are just too short. We can't reach everybody everywhere and regulate. It's very difficult to regulate social media, although there are laws to regulate it, but it's just very difficult by its nature.
But have you handled such cases where someone has had their rights infringed upon by a social media entity and they've approached you?
Yes.
So how many cases have you handled, say, this year?
We do have quite a number of them, but a lot of them is those anonymous people behind the internet, and we really cannot do anything about it. And because we can't trace them, and we don't have the manpower to trace them. So we just advise people who come to us to just maybe seek other means of tracing those people, because that's not within our capacity to be tracing someone on Twitter who says something. We just don't have the capacity
to trace.
Yeah, but if it's Herald, if it's Sunday Mail or whatever, we do have capacity because they fall under our ambit.
Okay. Now, some people believe really that we discussed media regulation, co-regulation, and some are of the view that self-regulation is the best way to go. You mentioned that as a country we are going towards co-regulation, and
no, I didn't mention that.
In our previous discussion, you said there were discussions. There were discussions,
yes, but I didn't say we are going towards.
No, but there are discussions. Yes, I might have to rephrase that.
Yes.
There are discussions around co-regulation. Now, some people may want to understand the benefits of media co-regulation.
Well,
as opposed to the other forms of.
The best person to answer that would not be the Media Commission. It would be those associations that you talked about wanting co-regulation.
But as a commission, are you not part of the discussions?
We are, obviously. We are part of it. We are part of it.
And you've obviously had the arguments from the other side.
Look, co-regulation, I guess, to be quite honest, I don't know the benefits other than what is obtaining now. You would actually be in a better position if you ask those parties who want it. We are happy with what the Constitution says. We are the state regulator. And we love it when they self-regulate. We have no problem with the law changing, but right now the law has us as the regulator. So those other associations who want co-regulation would tell you the benefits more.
Okay,
because we don't see what is wrong with the situation now.
Oh, definitely, we'll reach out to some of those.
We won't resist it, but we won't resist it if the law changes. But we'll just resist it if the law has not changed, because then that will mean we're going against the Constitution, yes. Because the Constitution appoints the Media Commission to regulate the media industry. It doesn't even say you regulate with someone else. But if the law changes, there is absolutely no problem.
Okay.
With that,
Okay, we'll definitely reach out to those proponents of co-regulation, and they will shed more light on why they think co-regulation is the best foot forward. We take a short breather, and after this break, we will obviously focus on laws that are relevant to the media, especially as Zimbabwe approaches the 2023 harmonized elections. Don't go anyway. We'll be right back.
Welcome to Chew On, the show that links people, food and culture whilst giving you a diverse culinary experience.
Pure ingredients, wholesome, vibrant and earthy dishes. When you get all the elements together, it all sings. That's what Zimbabwean food is all about. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Chew On.
Welcome back to the second and last segment of this episode of Fourth Estate, live from our ZTN Prime studio in Harare. I'm your host, Tinomuda Chakanyuka. In this segment, we focus on laws that are relevant to the media, especially as Zimbabwe is approaching the 2023 harmonized elections. And joining me tonight is Commissioner Miriam Tuasemajome from the Zimbabwe Media Commission. Welcome back to Fourth Estate, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Now let's jump straight into it. The Cyber and Data Protection Act. In brief, Commissioner, do media practitioners in this country really have to worry about this act, particularly during this election period? What are some of the areas that they should be on the lookout for?
Especially they have to worry about it because they have a lot of power at their hands. There's no person who's more powerful than someone holding a pen, because they have the power to make or break reputations, characters, feelings, and a whole lot of other things. And now they don't do it with their pen. They do it behind a gadget, and they post things perhaps that are not true, things that may be malicious, things that may be spiteful, things that may be divisive, things that may be hateful, hate speech, things that may propagate violence. So through devices, through their phones, through computers. So they really do have to worry about being truthful. They have to worry about maintaining their integrity as professionals. And professionals means you have to always remember your ethics, and that they must just always be beholden to the truth and nothing else but the truth. And something may be truthful, but it may not necessarily mean you have to write it. For example, if perhaps they're covering a politician who perhaps has said, things that propagate violence, they have a responsibility in terms of their ethics to just not spread it using social media, because that leads to violence and destruction.
We were going to come to that aspect, where I would also want you to, in detail, really explain where we draw the line between propagating hate speech and being a conveyor, simply a conveyor of hate speech. But before we get to that, there's a clause in the Cyber and Data Protection Act which prohibits the transmission of false information, like you mentioned. In what ways can people in general, citizens in general, and of course journalists, in what ways can they be found on the wrong side of this law, in as far as elections are concerned?
They can be found if they, perhaps, let me just use Twitter, if they retweet false information, if they retweet hurtful information, they will definitely be found foul of the law. If they do not verify their facts, if they do not make sure that whatever they're sending out is accurate information, they will definitely be found foul of the law. So it just calls upon journalists and ordinary citizens to make sure that before they sit down and start sharing information, what's on WhatsApp, on Twitter, on Facebook, that whatever it is they're sharing, like you're saying, you are hinging it on politics, about politics, is factual information, because it doesn't matter who you are. You're a journalist. You can't hide behind the cover of, oh, I was just informing people. And you can't hide behind, if you're an ordinary person, that, oh, I just saw it on Twitter, or I just saw it on WhatsApp, because you will definitely be found foul of the law if the law wants to get hold of you.
A lot of people are not quite aware of these legal pitfalls, especially concerning around the Cyber and Data Protection Act. Do you feel enough education has been done around the Act and its provisions?
There'll never be enough education. There'll never be enough education, and it's up to people to educate themselves, really. And like they say, ignorance of the law is not a defense. Zimbabwe has a very high literacy rate, but people should just make sure they read and they seek information and look for useful information, not rumor mongering. So that's why the responsibility is with social media users, because if you join WhatsApp, there are terms and conditions. It comes with terms and conditions.
But do people read those?
They should read them. You see, they can't say, I didn't read it, I just ticked a box. No, every single service provider on your gadgets has terms and conditions. And one of them is definitely staying away from hate language, hate speech, definitely violence. That's why you can be blocked on Twitter. I think
if
you can
share
exactly
that is gratuitous violence.
Exactly.
Now let's now focus on the electoral law, where there's a clause which prohibits the unofficial or false declaration of election results. We have often seen a number of online platforms, including some very prominent people, posting what they term real-time results, often obtained from postings or what the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission would have posted at different different polling stations, rather. This can be quite tricky for the media in this sense. ZEC has posted at a provincial command center what many may feel are results. What should a journalist do in that situation? Would they be liable if they were to report and publicize those as final results?
Yes, they'd be liable because the law says only the Zimbabwe Election Commission is the one that declares the winner. They can publish results. I mean, because they're really in the public domain. They can share amongst themselves, but declaring someone a winner, that's not allowed. So they would definitely be liable if they declare a certain person a winner when ZEC has not declared them as such. So they should just abide by the law and just wait for ZEC to declare the results. But I know maybe perhaps what you're running at is that, fine, the information is already in the public domain.
Yes.
There's also freedom of speech, right? But freedoms have limitations.
And responsibilities,
yes, and responsibilities. Yes, so if the law says that ZEC is the only entity that has the
prerogative
to announce results, yes, you just abide by the law. I know people have this itch to break news and be the first with the news, but sometimes you've just got to remember those professional ethics, which include abiding by the laws of the land. They might not make sense to you, they might not make sense to anybody, but that's what the law says.
You mentioned laws of the land. In general, can you enlighten us on what the laws of the land say about political advertising in the media during elections?
Okay, that is covered under section 160E to about 160I of the Electoral Act. It gives very clear provisions of what is supposed to happen during election periods. In short, broadcasters and publishers are supposed to give the various political parties equal time, equal coverage.
But there's a debate around equal time and equal coverage, because some may then feel that what should be given to political parties is equitable time and equitable coverage, depending on the profile of the political party. Because you have one political party that is fielding 7 National Assembly candidates, and you have one that is fielding 210. Obviously, you cannot be in a position as a media house to give equal coverage to, but you can give equitable coverage.
That's true. Yeah, I think whatever the reasonable test applies there. What is reasonable? That will be reasonable. If it's the reasonable man test, reasonable politicians test applies. What is equitable? But I think what the law is just trying to say is that I think equal time, may be regarded as equitable, but it's just trying to avoid bias, where you are biased towards perhaps one political party and completely shutting out other voices, because that goes against what the electoral law
then
says.
you have some political parties who are media shy but are quick to then cry foul and say, no, we're not being covered. But when you try to reach out to them, they're not accessible.
I understand that very, very clearly. I think sometimes political parties, because they are politicians, they are so used to engaging in games that might actually just be a game where they're now trying to rope in the media as part of their games. But I think if it's a media house that's credible, I think you have perhaps your slots where you can always just redeem yourself. That, look, we called so-and-so, we had this program, but they refused to come. Yes, so I think the media can also be used by political. I mean, they are very crafty, some of them.
Cunning, quite.
All of them. All political parties are crafty.
Okay, and on that note, I should thank you very much. Thank you very much, Commissioner Miriam Tose Majome. This time I got the Tose right.
You did.
Thank you very much for joining us and sharing with us those small little nuggets of knowledge around the country's media laws, particularly now that we are heading towards elections. Well, that's it for tonight's episode of Fourth Estate. We were discussing laws that are relevant to the media, especially as the country is heading towards harmonized elections on August 23. A big thank you to our guest tonight, Commissioner Miriam Tose Majome from the Zimbabwe Media Commission. Let's make a date, same time, same place, next week. Pleasant viewing.